And then the next morning, my phone just formats itself.
It's crazy that that's happening in Canada.
But you would be subsidizing China indirectly.
What other options do we have? We can't grow a bigger economy overnight. What would you say is the red line that you think Canada should absolutely not cross?
I think we've already crossed it.
Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Thank you for having me.
I know it hasn't been that long since this book was published, but a lot has happened. I don't understand. What is Canada doing with China?
Ooh, I wish I understood what Canada's currently doing with China. I mean, that is the frustration is when you do this much research and you go to this kind of length to try to, I guess, illuminate or help people's understanding of where we've been to better provide insights into where we should be going or where we want to go. And then it seems to largely be ignored at this point. I mean, because how else? I can't explain otherwise how the government tries to engage in things like some type of a security law enforcement partnership with the PRC.
I remember Doug Ford, he held a press conference talking about, I don't know if you remember this, I don't know if you saw this, but he talked about how dangerous it is and how we are reliant on the US market. And then the next day they had a turnaround.
Well, they had a pizza lunch, and that apparently was all that was needed.
I do not understand. Do you have any understanding of why the change?
I was literally just as floored as you when I saw that. Especially because he came out making sense the first time around.
Yes.
And I just don't understand the rationale or reasoning for that. I mean, Doug Ford did display something that a bit of logic that was not correct when he had mentioned that if China was going to invest here and build plants or company or whatever, cars and hire workers, then he'd be okay with that. I also then heard Minister Jolie say something similar, that Canada was going to engage in some type of partnership.
Build EVs together?
Yeah, with building cars.
Right.
That for me is substantial magnitude worse than importing the car. You're now inviting the CCP to go into partnership with Canada in constructing vehicles that are undermining our own national security, our own supply chains, because you're going to be introducing parts and equipment into the supply chain. These cars are going to have to be serviced. You're going to be pulling that. And that's exactly what the Americans have been opposed in terms of one of the big issues that they've had with Canada is China using Canada to skirt US tariffs by having materials brought in here, assembled here, put together here, and then shipped across the border. Now, because they're made in Canada, they're avoiding tariffs that were on China.
Do you think if this deal goes forward, the US will allow the China-Canada co-made EVs into their market? Would they let Canadian EVs get away with that?
I doubt it. And that's the other thing is Canada is ignoring the allies that it actually has in the United States. If our current government believes that Democrats are also currently allied with Canada, that's not going to be the case for Democrats that are living and working in automotive states in the United States. I have not seen any that have come out in support of Canada's importation of PRC EVs, and I don't think we ever will.
So who are we going to sell those EVs to if we're not going to sell it to the US market? How are we going to sell them?
Right now, I heard rumors of a subsidy that was going to come out, but you would be subsidizing China indirectly for Canadians to buy these cars. Right. I don't think the demand is there. So the best that can happen is that people just refuse to buy. I mean, that's the other thing is what kind of restrictions are going to be put on the cars. We still don't know yet. I think that's coming soon. Right. But if there's going to be restrictions or recommendations of don't connect your, like similar to the UK, don't connect your phone to it, don't drive it to this workplace or that workplace. The obvious question that's people have to ask themselves is, why am I buying this car? I can't do any of these things that I can do with a normal car. What's the use?
Because it's cheap, I guess.
It comes with a cost to pay later.
I think in your book, you also talked a little bit about this very subtle dynamic between the three countries, China, Canada, and the US. So how does this play out? Like closer relationship with China, what does that mean for the Canada-U.S. relations?
It's nothing good. So I've heard these arguments in terms of, well, the U.S. trades with China. What's the big deal if
That's right.
The U.S. is the largest economy in the world. The biggest superpower that the world has ever seen. If China decides to try to retaliate against the United States for something or tries to impose a tariff, the United States can absorb that. It can then retaliate in a stronger way that might force the PRC to back down. It has, in other words, it has leverage. It has this ability to do these things. It also knows that when it's engaging with the PRC, it has different measures at home in terms of safeguards to deal with activities the PRC might try. Contrast this now to Canada. The PRC puts a tariff on canola and we buckle really quite quickly. It affects our industry out there in the West. And we buckle and allow PRC EVs into the country. In other words, we don't have the ability to absorb these types of retaliatory measures. We're just not that large of an economy. And we could do more on the national security end and on the safeguard issue, but we haven't done that either. So we're just doubly vulnerable to what the PRC does. The PRC knows exactly why it targeted canola for a very simple reason and knows that it's a wedge. It can make it a wedge issue. It knows that it can force Canada into a position that will strain its relationship with the United States. Canada should know that as well. And it should have known it because we can trade canola with a lot of countries. A lot of countries buy it. So when we talk about diversifying trade, we should have been doing that 60 years ago. And a lot of prime ministers have made that promise and they back away from it relatively quickly. And I expect this prime minister to be no different, to be honest. But then we should be diversifying canola because if we diversify canola, we better insulate ourselves from the attempts of the PRC to weaponize it against us, which they have done. The other aspect of this is that we share so much with the United States.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here for a second, because a lot of people say, what if it's U.S. EVs? They also maybe collect data. I mean, what's the difference between China and the U.S. selling EVs in Canada?
So the part that gets me when people have that argument is that we are in an intelligence sharing relationship with the United States. So if they collect from us and give it back to us, I don't see any difference in that at all. Two, they're also a rule of law country. China's not. I mean, you can oppose the data for privacy reasons going to an American corporation, and you should protect your data. They might sell it or they might use it without your knowledge. And Canadian companies do that too. That's something you should always be concerned about. When we're talking about China, it's a different animal. You're not going to fight the PRC in court about violating your data. That's not going to happen. You're not going to it's not going to work. So you have no recourse to anything they do with it. Secondly, and probably the bigger issue, is because I consider them, and so does the United States, as an adversary of the West, they would be using this information and this data to find vulnerabilities to attack you later. I saw a letter it just came out today. It just drove me nuts when I saw it, which was, well, I don't care if China knows that I text my wife about our dinner, or I get a text from her about groceries or something like that. And that understanding is far too common. It assumes that any one threat actor really cares about you personally, and what you do in your day-to-day life. Maybe, depending on who you are. That's entirely depending on who you are, who you're connected to, that could be a possibility. But more often than not, it's collection of data. It's more, and anybody who works with data understands this. It's not just one single data point. It's the collection of it. It's looking for patterns. It's looking for vulnerability. So the more information it can connect and learn about cell phone infrastructure, power grid infrastructure, peak times, different times a day, how it functions, how it behaves, depending on when all these people connect at certain points and what it does and how it behaves. The more data that they can suck up and get, the better they can launch a cyber attack against your power grid. Find a vulnerability in your cell phone network to shut it down or have it do something that can benefit it in a time of conflict. That's the issue. It's not just about your groceries. It's about all the back end that you're not seeing. When security people are warning people about this, when the UK is telling people maybe you shouldn't connect your phone to these cars or don't park it within certain distance of a government building or something, and people ignore it, I equate that to ignoring your doctor when your doctor's telling you that your health is deteriorating. These people are experts for a reason. They've seen it. They know what the outcomes can be, and they're trying to help you.
When you were researching the book, was there a moment where you're like, because this is sensitive stuff that you're writing about, and you're interviewing people that are potentially putting their personal safety in danger, and to talk to you. Was there any example, any moment where you're like, oh my God, this is real?
One of the big eye openers, and I actually mentioned in the book, I was in this location, I won't say where, won't say who. And yeah, it was very uncomfortable when we're sitting down having a conversation. We're sitting at a table that's a bit of a high top kind of table, and there's like 6 or 7 chairs. There's lots of empty areas around us, all kinds of seating available for people around us. And this guy comes and he sits down like right here, right next to us. And there's other seats at the high top table, like 2, 3 seats over. Like it's not, you can sit at the other end of it. But he chose to sit down right beside us and just be on his phone. And so I just did one of these and was fully prepared to say, what's your problem? But I stopped because of who I was with. So I just said, okay, let's continue this somewhere else. And so we left. And I could see they were uncomfortable too with what transpired. But that was a big realization for me that I would have had no qualms about the confrontation, but this person is in a much more delicate position and probably has to deal with this all the time. That was bothersome because it also made me think that they know who this person is.
Is this the same person that you woke up next morning and your phone was like
No.
cleared out? No, okay. This is another incident?
No, this was another incident. The person who I was talking to, where my phone blew up, I was talking to Shangzhu, talking to her, and because I interviewed her for the book, she's in chapter 2, and it was after my discussion with her, and when she tells me too that she's one of 6 people that the PRC is targeting or internationally or what have you, and then the next morning my phone just formats itself.
It's crazy that that's happening in Canada.
Yeah, it is. That's the reality. I mean, that's why this is something that people have to understand, that you have to put costs imposed on these countries for doing this. Now, I don't have to live in the community every day, so I don't have to deal with it all the time. And it still is different for me than it is for someone living in the community.
I am so glad you brought that up, because one of the most concerning updates for people like me from my community is that MOU that was signed between the law enforcement. The last time Canada had a really close relationship with China incentivized by trade, something similar, I remember, a similar MOU was also signed. That was a time when Lai, the famous alleged fugitive of China, he was forced, basically, he was deported by Canada, and then he was originally going to face like a death sentence. What does this MOU mean? Should Chinese Canadians like me, should we be worried?
I think so. And I think so because I don't see any kind of explanation of it as of yet. So until the government actually can clarify what does this mean, then I'm not thinking happy thoughts.
I was born and raised in the regime. I understand how dangerous, how just bad the PRC can be, how capable they are. But for people who are, like you said, born here, maybe they don't care so much about China. How do you think that would impact their lives? Just because they're Canadians, they're not Chinese Canadians, are they exempt from all of this? Are they safe?
No, not at all. Because, it's also a mistake to assume that all the issues are just going to stay confined or targeted against one community. Mm-hmm. When China tries to influence a vote, let's say, that's something that everybody here does. We all vote in elections. It's not just one community's election. It's the country's election. It doesn't matter if it's 1 riding or if it's 5 ridings. It's the election for Canadians. And in that sense, trying to influence or rig things in one particular area is, to my mind, treated as an attack against everybody. And that's how it should be regarded. The PRC is in a position now where it might very well be looking to take Taiwan militarily. That is going to have ramifications for everybody around the world because it's going to affect a lot of things. It's going to affect the global economy quite negatively if it does. It's going to affect and test alliances, both in that region and with the West. It's going to test our alliances with the United States. And people can say whatever they want about Donald Trump right now. Donald Trump is because Donald Trump has a term limit. And as far as I understand, that still is in play. In other words, that You can despise the administration, and there's all kinds of things that the administration has said and done that offends Canadians, and I totally understand and sympathize with all of that.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean that you justify your actions by partnering with a regime that is currently funding Russia and your adversaries around the world. This makes no sense. And so it's an issue that's going to affect all of us. It doesn't matter where we live.
I feel like when I talk to Canadians who are born and raised here, they have a very different view of China than I do because, again, I was born and raised
Sure.
in China. So I think a lot of them, when I try to tell them, this is dangerous thing that we're doing here, China is not our friend, a lot of them feel hopeless. They feel like, what other options do we have? We either cozy up to the US or we cozy up to China. We're a middle power. We can't grow a bigger economy overnight. Even if we were to, and I know we're not opposed to trading with China completely. It's okay to do that. And a lot of countries do that. What exactly should we be doing differently?
The first thing, I understand that perception as well. I've heard it too. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place between China and the United States is kind of how this is. I've heard this. Part of the problem with this that we've gotten into is because we've had no strategy. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like we are just reacting from one disaster to the next. We are moving from one failed policy or one failed thing to the next, rather than having a strategy to deal with the PRC, a strategy to deal with the United States. We kind of take things as they come. So for me, the strategy, is twofold. For one, for dealing with the United States, we should have been operating more like Mexico. In other words, understand the administration you're currently dealing with. And understanding the administration is going to change. You'll get to a better place later, but at least insulate things so that you're protecting your economy and what have you. Deal with the PRC, understand them as an adversary, first of all. Stop looking at them as some type of viable economic solution to the United States and your partnership there, because that's not realistic. They are not ever going to be just another country, same as any other country. That's just not going to happen. So understand the threat that they can pose to you, insulate yourself, mitigate yourself, and mitigate those threats, and demonstrate to them that you will impose costs. And then you can start talking about trade.
What kind of cost do you think Canada is capable of imposing, I guess? Like what can Canada do?
We have more ability to do things than people really give this country credit for. And we've been very much more selective in terms of sanctioning when it comes to the PRC versus Russia. But we seem to have no problem or ability to impose costs on other regimes except for China. The Iranian embassy was closed here.
Why leave China out particularly?
I think part of that is, historically, I think there is a culture that permeates that is so heavily emphasizing trade in our foreign relations. Especially right now, the voices advocating for better trade relations are the ones that are winning the conversations and are getting listened to. And those types of conversations and culture are predicated on don't rock the boat, don't cause waves that could endanger the trade element. But this is how backwards this is, because 75% of the trade goes to the United States. So would you not think that not rocking the boat should be also directed in that direction too? Like, I know things are coming back this way from the Trump administration. I get that. But there is an element of being a little bit more strategic. I see other countries deal with things that Trump says or does, including China. And a lot of them roll with it because they're strategically, they're thinking about how they can navigate these waters, how they can get something better for themselves. Instead, it seems like we're not thinking of that at all. We're just literally being combative and trying not to offend the second largest trading partner, which the gulf between the first and the second is $1 trillion.
Do you think China has that understanding? Do you think China understands that Canadians are pissed and they're kind of capitalizing on it?
Yeah, and I think that this is actually prime territory for the PRC to engage in foreign interference, and I believe 100% is already, in terms of seeking to divide the population further, seeking to exploit wedges and make things essentially worse in that regard, and trying to really pick on those types of divisions that exist within society between us and the Americans and accentuate them, make them worse, and cause more divide.
Right. Divide and conquer, as we say it.
For sure.
It sounds like China could be the biggest winner out of this thing. Is that possible?
I think it's certainly possible, because it's already winning right now. So one, it got positive reinforcement for its canola sanction, meaning that we rewarded coercion again. They used this tactic of imposing tariffs on canola to try to force a policy decision. They've done it twice now. And then on the second front, by allowing EVs into Canada, PRC EVs, they've won there. That's a much bigger win for them.
Why is that?
Well, because they're sitting on tons of electric vehicles that are not selling.
Right.
So they need to move these things because they're going to start dealing with deflation in China, which is going to be far worse to their economy because they're an export market. There is no internal consumption. They have to sell these things to the world. Canada just did them a big favor by opening up their market to these things. But the other is when these vehicles arrive, these are going to be loaded with technology that's going to be firing data back to the PRC that the PRC will collect, analyze, study, and use it as a further basis for finding vulnerabilities. You're plugging in PRC technology directly into your infrastructure here. When you have to charge it, into your cell phone networks, when you connect to it.
If you were to brief the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, tomorrow, what would you say is the red line that you think Canada should absolutely not cross in dealing with China going forward?
It's difficult because I think we've already crossed it. I think we've crossed it because we went into reigniting this term of a strategic partnership without doing anything different when it comes to the PRC, without doing anything different here in terms of imposing any kind of cost for their activities, with giving them now access to a North American auto market for their cars, which we had agreed to with the United States, not under Trump, under Biden. We had agreed to tariff those for the protection of national security and our shared auto industry. And we completely threw that out the window. And so for me, we've crossed lines already. So it's now more about managing what we've done and actually trying to find a way out of it.
What would you suggest?
Honestly, I'd like to go back on that EV deal, find a way to backpedal on that. And I would say that we need to get that registry set up. We need it up and running. We needed it up and running yesterday. We need to actually impose some costs on the worst offenders who are engaged in PRC interference here. During the Hogue inquiry, we heard all about different networks and proxies, and all these terms were flying around, and yet we see nothing. So something has to be done about the people that are out there doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Then we can start talking about a trading relationship that doesn't involve things that will undermine our security and our relationship with allies to the south and the rest of NATO too.
Thank you so much for the chat.
I really appreciate you having me, so thank you very much.